everyone, and welcome back to another World of Warcraft video. This is probably one of the ones I'm the most excited to record, really, because much of the Warcraft lore discussion is dominated by the many hints of the old gods, even, recently death itself, and it's interesting to think all of those things, but more importantly, it's fun, it's active, it's engaging. In many ways, though, it all started off with one item from Cataclysm, the Puzzle Box of Yogg-Saron. Now, here's the crazy thing. The Puzzle Box of Yogg-Saron is in BFA. Players can use it during the Zek'vos fight in Uldir. Now, we're not able to open it, but it clearly shows that Blizzard has that item in mind, and maybe they want us to remember that it exists, even though we have so many modern sources like Xal'atath and Il'gynoth. So today we're going to go into the whispers from the puzzle box, and we're going to break them down. With Blizzard reminding us so clearly of its existence, it seems like some of these whispers could be worked into the modern old god lore. And, well, we're going to make our way through the whispers, and believe me, some of these are really, really good. They also just sound really, really creepy, and they're really good audio quality. Now, I'm not saying that Xal'atath, hit up today's sponsor, Antlion Audio, but it would not surprise me. Their Mod Mic 5 is one of my favorite bits of kit since I picked it up like almost 2 years ago. Now, what is it? Well, it's a microphone for your headphones. So you see, gaming headsets, they tend to be overpriced, they've got average at best audio quality, and they've normally got a pretty weak mic. Well, with the Mod Mic, you can use your audiophile grade headphones and then clip the Mod Mic on with their handy magnet. Now, not only do you get to use your favorite audiophile headphones, you also get fantastic audio quality through the Mod Mic itself, especially if you're pairing it up with their USB sound card or getting real fancy with their XLR adapter. The Mod Mic has a unidirectional and omnidirectional capsule that you can switch between, as well as a hardware level mute switch. And if you want to check them out, you can hit up the link down below in the description. And also, it's like Cyber Week sale, so pay attention to that. So ditch your headset, get the headphones you love, use them, talk to your team with brilliant sound quality on the Mod Mic. It's just plain better. Okay, let's begin. The stars sweep chill currents that make men shiver in the dark. And I'm going to start off with this, which is a pretty good one. First, it clearly works in with the Circle of Stars line and the more recent line, the Circle of Stars Made Flesh, which involves Xal'atath, who gains a body in patch 8.1. Now, in a previous video, we covered how she is essentially a female Nyarlathotep, who is an outer god from Lovecraft's mythos that roams the world spreading madness. Well, here's the crazy thing. This line is almost directly lifted from the 1920 prose poem Nyarlathotep. This is the text that mostly introduced the character, and while it's not within the logic of Warcraft, it certainly seems like there's a connection between Xal'atath and Nyarlathotep. So Nyarlathotep is a short prose poem in which the narrator tells us about a humanity in decline and what happened when Nyarlathotep came to his city. A sense of monstrous guilt was upon the land, and out in the abysses between the stars swept chill currents that made men shiver in dark and lonely places. As you can see, that is essentially the line from the puzzle box. Now, it continues to get more interesting as the narrator tells us of when Nyarlathotep visited his city, a city which he calls the great, the old, the terrible city of unnumbered crimes. Now, if that seems familiar, it's because that's another line from the puzzle box relating to Ny'alotha. Now, in the story, Nyarlathotep attempts to dazzle the city's inhabitants with scientific tricks, but the narrator just doesn't really believe it. He thinks Nyarlathotep is trying to fool them. But soon enough, though, something descends upon them from the stars. It's not a direct madness, but it's a sort of loose compulsion. The crowd splits into three marching formations, with one disappearing around a corner with only the sound of moaning being heard, another entering the subway with only maniacal laughter being heard, and then finally the narrator's group leaves the city and travels out into the country through inexplicable snow. The column gets more and more thin as they go, and eventually the narrator sees a glimpse of something that is best read to you because it's intentionally indescribable. Screamingly sentient, dumbly delirious, only the gods that were can tell. A sick and sensitive shadow writhing in hands that are not hands, and whirled blindly past ghastly midnights of rotting creation, corpses of dead worlds that were cities, charnel winds that brush the pallid stars and make them flicker low. Beyond the world's vague ghosts of monstrous things, half-seen columns of unsanctified temples that rest on nameless rocks beneath space and reach up to dizzying vacua above the spheres of light and darkness. And through this revolting graveyard of the universe, the muffled, maddening beating of drums and thin, monotonous whine of blasphemous flutes from inconceivable, unlighted chambers beyond time, the detestable pounding and piping whereunto dance slowly, awkward awkwardly and absurdly the gigantic, tenebrous ultimate gods, the blind, voiceless gargoyles whose soul is Nyarlathotep. So that all seems a bit mad, and you might be wondering what it is. Well, think about Warcraft, because this is basically a description of the Warcraft cosmos without the Burning Legion. Now, I'm not going to make a follow-up video called Sargeras Did Nothing Wrong, but what this is describing is a cosmos where the old gods pretty much reign in, absolute control. Remember what we saw during the Star Augur fight? A universe that's almost entirely destroyed by the Legion or consumed by old gods? Well, in Lovecraft's cosmos, there is not really an equivalent, force to counter the old gods, and really, when we look at the current lore, with the Legion defeated, the forces of the Void have near total control. Even before we defeated the Legion, they had spread to innumerable worlds far, off around us. As for the stars sweeping chill currents, well, in a universe that's almost entirely corrupted, the very stars themselves are working against us, and we are almost entirely surrounded by things that dwarf us in scale. Nyarlathotep uses science to dazzle and amaze, but he knows that we'll sort of ultimately destroy ourselves. Lovecraft in many ways was worried about what we would do when we became advanced, and there's a bit of a Xal'atath parallel here, because when we say our big farewell to her in 8.1, she says she has a gift for us. So overall, quite spooky, and I think that passage is a good description of the Warcraft universe and just what is outside of Azeroth, and basically how dark and ghastly the whole thing is. Okay, let's move on to Even Death May Die. So this, once again, is directly lifted from Lovecraft. This time it's from the 1921 short story The Nameless City, which describes an ancient civilization that is long gone. In it, we meet the author of the Necronomicon, who says, that is not dead which can eternal lie, and with strange aeons even death may die. Now, the first line spells out how death isn't really a factor for the old ones. They can sort of be dead and dreaming. Now, with strange aeons even death may die, well, this is sort of a big concept thing, I suppose. In a future where Azeroth is corrupted and sentient life is over, really nothing means anything, and for the only beings that are left, well, that is, not dead, which can eternal lie. They live sort of beyond time. Now, this is interesting because the Void Lords themselves seem to exist outside the current universe, at least according to Chronicle. Now, the whole thing is them trying to get in, which itself is very similar to StarCraft's Xel'Naga, so it's clearly a concept that Blizzard have been really, they've been using in their other works. Now, if you think about it, if death can die by having all regular beings being destroyed, then it certainly makes sense that the manifestations of death and the manifestations of the Void would be at odds with each other, which again is a story beat that we see currently in the Warcraft universe. And that's something that I've covered before, so I'm not really going to repeat myself here. Now, next we've got the Ny'alotha lines. So many of these lines have a lot to read into, but some of them are just direct references like these. So we've got, in the land of Ny'alotha, there is only sleep. In the sleeping city of Ny'alotha, walk only mad things. Ny'alotha is a city of old, terrible, unnumbered crimes, and in the sunken city, he lays dreaming. Again, we see lots of similar elements here. We've got sleep, we've got dreams, we've got madness, that's all being brought up. They're questioning reality, as pointed out by another line. Do you dream while you sleep, or is it an escape from the horrors of reality? And the only thing I would say to that is, how can you really tell that you're not dreaming right now? Follow the logic deep enough and you realize you can't. So indeed, there's another puzzle box line which kind of goes at that, which is there is no sharp distinction between the real and the unreal. Now, before we get too loopy with all this stuff, it's worth mentioning the parallel. Ny'alotha is a city of old, unnumbered crimes, which is pretty much straight from the narrator of Nyarlathotep. Now, all these lines are to say that Ny'alotha is a place that's pretty damn spooky. N'Zoth is there. He's likely to be beneath the waves. At the bottom of the ocean, even light must die. That's another line that is, again, hitting on the bottom of the ocean being so different to what we know. Of course, here on Earth, the bottom of the ocean is freaking alien when you look at it sometimes. Now, while light isn't capitalized, of course, it's a nod to the light. Now, at the bottom of the ocean, it has no power. Why? Well, if the remnants of the Black Empire are all the way down there buried beneath, then, that's from a time where light wasn't really present on Azeroth, and you could probably imagine that a lot of what makes us powerful would be fairly useless down there. And of course, that is something we might have seen a glimpse of in Warbringers Ashara. Okay, so with that, let's move on to some more of the N'Zoth lines. So, the drowned god's heart is black ice, and the fish know all the secrets, they know the cold, they know the dark. Both of these things make sense once you've seen Warbringer's Ashara, especially the fish. Now, N'Zoth's heart being black ice seems to be very at odds with his emotional response during Warbringers. It could be just that, that's what he thinks will work for Ashara. After all, if you look at Ashara, she seems to have a big case of protagonist syndrome, so by making her think like she made a deal with him, then that could be her duped, and N'Zoth will probably just throw her away once he's done with her. Just look at what happened with Deathwing and what would have happened when he was done with being, impaled in Wormrest Temple. As for the fish, look at how N'Zoth is originally portrayed, but that can go a bit deeper. Now, life began in the oceans on Earth. The same probably goes for Azeroth, so yeah, the fish would have indeed been the first thing there to see the old gods. And I guess maybe that's why they, are portrayed in the way that they are sometimes. Next, the silent, sleeping, staring houses in the Blackwoods always dream. It would be merciful to tear them down. This is such an odd line because right now it seems to have so little connection with the game. But what's interesting is that it's almost directly lifted from another Lovecraft story, The Picture in the House. Here's the original text. Only the silent, sleepy, staring houses in the Blackwoods can tell all that has laid hidden since the early days, and they are not communicative, being loath to shake off the drowsiness which helps them forget. Sometimes one feels that it would be merciful to tear down these houses, for they must often dream. In literal terms, these are old decrepit houses in rural New England, and the horrors that they witnessed are essentially just the dark, repressed traits that were sort of brought out in the rural Puritans who first traveled to to New England in the mid-1600s. I believe they did pretty well, eventually became in decline. The antagonist of this story is pretty much an old descendant of them who was a cannibal, and it's implied that he had an unnaturally long life because of his cannibalism. Basically, the people in the area have done sort of terrible things, and it would be merciful to tear the houses down for, must they not dream about what they have seen, because they're so deeply ingrained into the place. Overall though, it's an early example of Lovecraft country. It makes reference to Arkham and the Miskatonic Valley. Now Arkham is one of the central locations of the stories in the mythos. Now the cannibalism is tied to a book about the Congo. Given Lovecraft, let's not go into that. Basically though, it's a simple but atmospheric story about a genealogist who stumbles across what's probably an ancestor gone wrong, and basically it seems like what he's trying to say is we're all vulnerable to madness once structures fall apart. Now, you could directly map the Blackwoods and stuff and the houses onto Drustvar with creepy ancestors and all that, but right now I don't think it means that much, but I do want to talk about the other Black Forest lines because, well, these are challenging. We just don't know what the Black Forest is. So here are the lines. Look around, they will all betray you, flee screaming into the Black Forest. And the next one is, there is a little lamb lost in dark woods. So we've got Blackwoods, Black Forest, Dark Woods. They're clearly all referring to something, but we really have no idea what it literally is. There's no other big link. With these two lines, I didn't see a super direct Lovecraft parallel either, which does make them seem a little bit more unique and intentional, as if they're Blizzard's own creation. It could just be a state of mind of madness, I suppose, if we're going to go metaphorical. Now, real world locations are a bit tricky. It could refer to, say, a kelp forest deep under the ocean. Of course, it could refer to Drustvar or Tirisfal. It's something we might know in the future. We know a little bit more about the Shadowlands now, but I am expecting that to be expanded upon in the near future, which means that I think this could be a bit more clear in the future. Maybe these could be referring to some structure of the Shadowlands. But next, though, we've got the Void lines. So the Void sucks at your soul, it is content to feast slowly, and all places, all things have souls, all souls can be devoured. Now, both of these lines are quite simple. They're just talking about slow, inevitable doom that we can really do nothing against. And of course, it's decently in line with how the Void can eat away its sanity slowly. I mean, come on, just look at what Ilaria has been talking about in the last few months of the game lore. Now, the line, all places, all things have souls, is kind of interesting. It doesn't mention beings. Of course, it's a given that they have souls within the Warcraft universe, but places and things? Well, of course, Azeroth did turn out to have a soul, a world soul. Perhaps there is something to all planets in Warcraft, even if it isn't a Titan, hard to know, but all souls can be devoured, and then when we look out at the cosmos, it's pretty much confirmed one of the last places left. So yeah, TLDR, the Void is pretty spooky, and just think about that imagery from the section of Nyarlathotep that I read out, and yeah, it doesn't look good for us, does it? Okay, let's move on. The Giant Rook watches from dead trees. Nothing breathes beneath its shadow. Well, the literal readings of this are quite simple. The Giant Rook could be a direct match to Black Rook Hold. Now, the Rooks are in the same family as ravens, so it could cover Medivh, Khadgar, or Odin, who has 2 ravens. Of course, we have the line, the Lord of Ravens will turn turn the key. As for the dead trees, once again, this could be the Black Forest. Overall, though, I found that this line doesn't have a clear read just yet. I don't want to go into everything that I did with that, but I think we're going to maybe have a clearer view of that probably within the next year or two. And I guess speaking of other things that are spooky and not really clear, beneath the shadow of the darkened spire, there is no light, no mercy, only void and the chaos within. So let's roll with the most simple reading of this. The spire could be Karazhan. Of course, the whole land around Karazhan is dead. And remember that Karazhan in-game is far smaller than Karazhan in lore, which is absolutely massive. So Karazhan, of course, is built on ley lines, but it's very clear that something dark inherently is going on there, and I wouldn't be surprised if Blizzard were to use Karazhan as a major lore point again in the future. Now, Darkened Spire is an interesting line because it implies that it was not always darkened, so it could be something that was corrupted. What could the Spire be? Well, you know, it could be, say, the World Pillar of Azeroth. That would kind of fit the bill, especially if the planet was corrupted. It's also possible that Ny'alotha and the ruins of the Black Empire are involved. After all, Xal'atath talks about spires of sacrifice, so this could be trying to tie into some of those lines and maybe talk about, like, you know, the Black Empire resurgence as a bit of story, which you could see as being something that was teased in Warbringer's Ashara. Okay, let's move on to another line. So, have you had the dream again? A black goat with 7 eyes that watches from the outside. This is a direct foreshadow of Y'Shaarj, who is inspired by Shub-Niggurath, who is the black goat in the forest with 1,000 young in the Lovecraft lore. Now, the 7 eyes seems to come from Altered States, which was probably inspired by the 7-eyed, 7-horned lamb from the Book of Revelation. Now, Y'Shaarj is basically Shub-Niggurath, but with 7 heads. So it's a pretty simple tease of a future villain on the face of it, but there are a few important words. Watches from the outside, because, you know, could it be that a truly dead old god is instead banished to whatever lies outside the universe? Which would make sense. We know there is something outside the universe, because canonically that's where the Void Lords are. Now, this is kind of in line with what I mentioned earlier, and it also seems like a reference to Yogg-Saron, who also is like a being who kind of exists outside of, like, the normal universe. So yeah, pretty spooky stuff, and you could extrapolate that into just some of the mechanics of how all these Void sort of guys work. Okay, so with that covered, next, let's just quickly, like, blast through the rest of them. What can change the nature of a man? This is really simple. It's a reference to Planescape Torment, which is a 90s CRPG. We then have just some generally spooky lines, which don't really mean that much. You know, stuff like, you know, you cling to your life as if it actually matters. Ancestors cling to you screaming in silence. And then the final line for this video ties back into BFA, and that's open me, open me, open me, only then will you know peace. Of course, we try to open the puzzle box in the Zek'vos fight in Uldir, but we fail. So you're probably wondering, like, what is the puzzle box? What's in it? We don't know, and that's kind of what's exciting, because it's now back in the story. I had just assumed that this would have faded into obscurity and would have never played a role in the story, but now in BFA, they're hinting at it being used in something. And yeah, I mean, today's video is less of a big grand theory, and it's more existing to introduce people to Lovecraft's work and show where Blizzard got their ideas from. There you go. I hope this video has introduced you to the work of Lovecraft and brought that into the Puzzle Box of Yogg-Saron. Now that this has been hinted in BFA, I think it's just worth doing a refresher on the Puzzle Box, which is why I've done this video. And yeah, we'll just have to see where things go. I think personally, the next big thing I'm going to be thinking about is the Black Forest stuff, because I spent a lot of time writing this video just staring at my laptop screen about the Black Forest, just not really knowing exactly where they were going with it. And there's some things like, you know, Una, the Draenei kid, and the goat that sort of fit, but not really in a way that I found to be satisfying. So that's, yeah. If you've got any ideas or theories about the Black Forest, basically, I would love to hear them down below. But that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.